And try and come and get me and hopefully get back to Dallas tomorrow.
All right, Rod, thank you. Somebody else I want you to meet, Charlotte. She's a native. Can we please see your
video right now? Can we cut Will's mic there very quickly? He can't hear us very clearly. Take a look at what's on your screen right now.
We understand that the United States government is now bombing Afghanistan. You are looking at live pictures coming in from our affiliate CNN feeding this into us. You can see off in the distance some smoke and what looks like perhaps some buildings that have been hit. You can see the orange glow from flames. We don't know at this point. Well, you can see what looks like another explosion happening right now to the right center of your screen. We don't know at this point exactly what buildings are being hit.
We do know this is in Kabul, Afghanistan, and the thing that is probably the most impressive about this is that the United States has, almost 9 hours now after the first incident, has struck back. Afghanistan, as we heard from our terrorism experts who spoke to us just moments ago, has been the home for terrorist organizations. Afghanistan has allowed them to stay there. In terms of Osama bin Laden, who has been sought internationally ever since the Trade Center bombing, has managed to avoid any kind of law enforcement. They've not been able to get him. International police and international intelligence communities have never been able to lay a hand on him. At this point in time, the United States apparently has now executed an attack on the place that he has called home.
And I suppose we should not be surprised because earlier in the day, President Bush said that the United States would be responding in a very swift manner and would be taking very strong action, and I suppose that is what we are looking at right now.
In the discussions that took place today, we understand that here was our Secretary of State is flying back from Peru. This video is just amazing that you're seeing the rockets going through the air right now. The Secretary of State flying back from Peru, the President on the road, as it were, flying from Florida, where he had been when he got the first word of the first airplane hitting the towers. And then, of course, after that, and then speaking to reporters at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. We understand the President is on his way back here. We're not sure exactly when he will arrive back in Washington. But obviously, in the talks they've had, they got together and put a plan together right away.
But we do know that President Bush will be addressing the nation from the White House this evening at 9 p.m. So we've been with you all morning long, throughout the afternoon and well into the evening now. And we invite you to stay with us because we will be bringing you that address live as it happens tonight from the White House at 9 p.m.
We're trying to get more information for you as to exactly what you're seeing. We know where this is taking place. We don't know what the targets are, whether these are areas in which we believe that these are rebel camps or where there are training centers for terrorists, not rebel, but terrorists, I should say, whether these are terrorist training camps that are being attacked here. The video that you're seeing is coming from CNN, where they have cameras in fixed positions there, and it is really quite remarkable. These scenes are ones that make us realize that the United States certainly is not going to take this lightly by any stretch of the imagination, and that the response, as the President promised it would be, has been swift.
Very, very swift. You can see off in the distance the explosions continue. We don't know if the planes are continuing to drop weapons, artillery down onto buildings now, or if this is the result of action that happened just a few moments ago.
One piece of information we're getting, Tracy, is that this may be a fuel dump that we actually see burning in the night there. Again, what we don't know exactly is what the location. We know that it's in Kabul, Afghanistan, but we don't know exactly whether this is part of one of the areas where they train terrorists, or a suspected area where they train terrorists. We do know that they have been harbored by that country for many, many years, and the United States has certainly expressed its displeasure and hasn't gotten very far with being able to end it.
Keeping with the idea of training, you know that when we were talking to Police Chief Charles Ramsey earlier, we were talking about the fact that D.C. police were training for the IMF World Bank meetings and the potential protest and problems that would come with that. It's possible now we're getting word that those meetings might be put on hold. They were planned for later on this month, but in light of what's happening this evening, what has happened all day, those meetings might very well be put on hold.
This video looks a little shaky here. We are told that this is actually coming from a video phone. You may remember that CNN managed to make quite a name for itself and video phones with its pictures that took place from China that were bootlegged, if you will, out of China before the Chinese government officials discovered that they were sending that video back live. The United States has been attacked in a way that on the continental soil of our country that we have never been attacked before. The total number of people who have been killed by these attacks that have been taking place today may exceed the attack on Pearl Harbor. And that is something that certainly gives pause as we look at what our next step will be. And talking with the various terrorist experts that we have spoken to today, they indicate that it is so difficult. We sort of know who our enemy is, but not exactly. We don't know when he will strike. We only know that he will strike at some point, and probably when we least expect it.
These are pictures of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. We are getting word now that Israel has declared a day of mourning tomorrow for today's victims of the terrorist attack at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Ben Vinsky joins us again, and you were with us earlier today. Give us some insight now. Not a surprise that the U.S. is striking back this hard, this fast?
If that's in fact what is going on, which it certainly appears to be, no, not a surprise. If we've drawn a quick connection to networks that are associated with Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, these are organizations that we've known quite a bit about for some time, where they're located, where they have facilities and things in Afghanistan. It's not surprising that we would be hitting them this quickly if we do have that kind of good information.
It raises the question we talked earlier about the fact whether or not certainly the members of the Senate Intelligence Committee indicated they were very angry that the United States didn't have more intelligence information out there about this taking place. Perhaps we have more than those of us who are now trying to report on this story really know about. Perhaps they had just a few things that were missing, and now the dots have been connected.
Well, the difficulty is that you can know an incredible amount of things about a component or a portion of an organization and know absolutely nothing about another cell operating in a different area.
Explain that very quickly before you go any farther. For those who haven't seen movies about this subject and are not aware with it, tell us what a cell is.
A cell, a terrorist organization, because it's being pursued by so many different security organizations, intelligence, law enforcement, and others, will divide its operations up into various cells, small groups of individuals that will not directly interact or even know who other members of that terrorist organization are. The goal is to design it so that if one of those people gets arrested or is being followed by police, that they don't tip off authorities to all of the other operations. They, in fact, have no ability to because they don't know who other people are. And there are certain means with which these groups communicate with each other that even allows them, even when talking, not to know exactly who they're talking to, but yet that it's a trusted means or a trusted way to get direction or guidance. So you can have penetrated or found out about one or two cells operating in one or two cities around the world, and while you may know everything that they're doing, you may very well know nothing about the cell that's located right next door to you. And this is what makes it so difficult about trying to track these organizations and find out where they're operating and what kinds of operations they're planning.
Let's talk, Ben, about the difficulty in tracking down. I mean, the United States has been trying to track down Osama bin Laden for years and find him. We understand that he's constantly on the move. I mean, it's quite possible he's not even in Afghanistan at this point.
The general consensus is that he is somewhere in around Afghanistan, but you're absolutely right. He could have moved outside of the country. It's really difficult to say. And all of the wonderful technological inventions and devices in the world won't tell you where somebody is when they're not using anything. If you begin to understand how we track or follow people and you simply begin to stop using those devices, then what you're left with is human intelligence. When you actually have assets, you have people that have penetrated those groups that are actually there on the ground that can tell you, yes, this person is here, this is where they're going, this is what they're intending to do. But that is very time-consuming. It takes a lot of resources. It doesn't always work. But unfortunately for these types of problems, it is one of the only real methods you have of finding out what they're intending to do and when.
It's probably worth pointing out at this point that the particular way in which Afghanistan is laid out, the terrain, the way the cities are laid out and that sort of thing, is a perfect place to do what bin Laden has been doing.
Oh, yes, it is. And we must keep in mind that bin Laden has an extensive amount of experience combating back during the Cold War the Soviets in Afghanistan. And in fact, many of these members of these terrorist organizations in Algeria, in Palestine, and Somalia, Sudan, other places around the world, got their first introduction to fighting in a lot of these different environments in Afghanistan. And it's a very mountainous region. He has numerous hideouts, numerous places that he can go that would be extremely difficult to attack, airstrike, or through any other means.
For balance, let me point out that Afghanistan's hardline Taliban rulers reject any suggestions that Osama bin Laden is responsible for the terrorist attacks today in Washington at the Pentagon and in New York at the World Trade Center. But I guess, Ben, not a surprise there.
No, that's been consistent since Osama bin Laden was forced out of Sudan and moved to Afghanistan. That has been the Taliban's constant line as they've strived in some ways to get the international community to recognize them as the official government of Afghanistan, which the U.S. does not. They've maintained that they've removed Osama bin Laden's means of communicating with members of his organization and others, and that he is, they would have you believe, in a tent very humbly living out his existence with no means of communication or ability to interact with any of the members of the organizations that are associated with his group, which is numbering over the dozens, including two of the key terrorist groups that were very active in Egypt, Islamic Jihad and Egyptian Islamic Jihad and Al-Ghamiyah Islamic group, and others have kind of affiliated themselves with Osama bin Laden.
You got to wonder, certainly, if anybody, if they really truly believe that anybody believes that.
Excuse me, believes...
I'm sorry, believes that the line from the Taliban that, of course, that Osama bin Laden.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kind of drift onto obtusity there.
Right. No, and I made the comment, earlier today that, at any other time it was almost a laughable comment by the Taliban to actually. Nobody's
laughing today, though, Ben, and that's the absolute truth. Listen, thank you very much for your time, and we certainly would like to talk to you again soon if we may. Thank you very much.
We're going to go now to Fox 5's Bob Barnard, who is live at the Pentagon. Bob, I'm sure you're hearing some of this. You know that right now Afghanistan is being bombed. But what's the latest there? I see flames in that live picture that we're showing our viewers right now.
That's the roof of the Pentagon. The Pentagon, 9 hours later, is still on fire, as you see here. They're obviously having a tough time putting this fire out. The flames are intense. This is the roof of the west side of the building, and the flames every so often flare up and intensify like this. We'll show you a wider shot because on the other side, the south side of the crater that was created by the plane crash, if you see up to the right a little bit more on the roof here, it's still flaming, smoking there primarily, but obviously flaming below. And you see the firefighters, Arlington County firefighters leading this battle here, trying to contain this fire. And until they do, search and rescue teams will not go in there. They are positioning themselves around the Pentagon, the west side of the Pentagon here, but they cannot get in there to recover bodies, to see if perhaps anyone is still alive. I frankly was in Oklahoma City the day late the day that the bombing there in April of 1995, and there were still people alive inside the rubble at this point, 9 hours after the fact. And as you can see here, they're still fighting fire and cannot get in to see if there's anyone still alive inside until they get the fire contained. And if our shot, Don, if you pan off to the left a little bit, we've been seeing other firefighters wielding axes here. It looks like they are trying to create a fire break to keep the fire from spreading, throughout the Pentagon. And it's been spreading from right to left, as you see the picture on the right, from the crater, and that's basically heading north. And firefighters here are trying to get this thing contained, and they haven't yet 9 hours later. And again, until they do, take a look at that. This from Skyfox. Utter devastation here, and it's amazing because this sort of does look like the Murrah building in downtown Oklahoma City from 6 years ago. And if this alone happened today, it would be unbelievable. But then the pictures from New York, the Twin Towers, just totally dwarf this. But take a look. That's what Skyfox showed us earlier today from the Pentagon. This is not live. This was earlier, a couple hours ago, from Skyfox, and you can see the different layers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers in. The different rings, they call them, leading into the atrium of the Pentagon. And the first 3, E, D, and C, were penetrated by the American airline jet and are still on fire. This a couple of hours ago, but still on fire at this hour, 9 hours later. So until they get this thing contained, they cannot go in and find out how many people were killed and may still be alive inside the Pentagon here. Just an incredible afternoon, incredible day here in Washington as well as New York, Tracy and Mike.
You're right. Incredible is the word, Bob, and we're going to use your experience in Oklahoma as a reason to hold on to hope that perhaps even several hours after this, started this morning, that perhaps they can still find survivors as they did in the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma.
There was that 15-year-old girl who was trapped. They had to amputate her leg from concrete that had fallen on her. So perhaps, as difficult as it may seem looking at the picture, especially on the right, and on the left is the triage from earlier. This is the work that Skyfox is showing you on the left from earlier. This is where they set up an on-site emergency room, if you will, taking care of the injured here. So they were able to get to the people who got out of the building, but perhaps there are still, hard as it may seem to believe, looking at the crater that was left by this plane that was intentionally steered into the building here at the Pentagon. But there is a chance perhaps there are people alive in there, and boy, you just hope they're holding on, because they're not going to go in until they get this fire contained. And as we did learn in Oklahoma City, there were people that were pulled out of rubble even as devastating as this. That's amazing stuff from Skyfox.
It really is an exclusive view, because from high above you can get a real good sense of the devastation, Bob.
Yeah, and I know they were the authorities were not wanting media to get anywhere, and here is you see they're looking either for evidence, obviously for evidence here, as the FBI, in fact, we were told earlier, is in charge of the investigation here as to what happened, and these are people obviously looking for evidence on the grounds just outside the building. But I'll tell you, that there could be people still alive in there, and they haven't gotten to them yet. And we just got to hope they can contain this fire 9 hours later that is still raging. And again, as I was mentioning, that it took some doing to get Skyfox in this position to take these exclusive pictures, but they obviously did a great job, and they are very telling pictures to show you a bird's eye view of what's going on here. This again a little bit earlier, but all the work being done outside the building in there, a view of the collapsed roof on the outer wing of this five-sided building. And again, this area in particular was just recently renovated. They've been doing a lot of work, just recently renovated work, and so they had different military services moving into this area, and they frankly don't know who all was stationed in these offices that were destroyed this morning and are still on fire this afternoon. So that's why we don't have a count on how many people are victims of that devastation that we're seeing here. These exclusive pictures from Skyfox from about 2 hours ago over the Pentagon here. Just mortifying pictures.
Indeed they are. Bob Barnard, we thank you for that update from the Pentagon.
We understand that this video was shot while Skyfox was assisting law enforcement in trying to deal with this situation there. The pictures really are stunning, particularly in the wide shots. I mean, the close-up video we've seen pretty clearly, but when you get to see the perspective of how much damage was done there, it is just unbelievable.
It really is. And I'm going to pass along 2 bits of information as we stick with the Skyfox video. I want to let you know that the CIA will be open tomorrow. All employees are expected to report tomorrow. And also, OPM says that federal offices in D.C. will be open tomorrow. Unscheduled leave is in effect. That is different from liberal leave. So unscheduled leave for federal workers tomorrow.
This video is hard to stop looking at. It's just so compelling and so unbelievable that it's taken place. But the video that we saw earlier today probably was the most heart-stopping I've seen as a journalist in 30-plus years. We were looking at the video of the tower burning. A plane had crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers, and suddenly, out of the right-hand side of the screen, came an airplane from nowhere, it seemed like. And seconds later, we realized it had hit the other tower, that all aboard that aircraft, that the people who were inside that building were lost. Let's go now to Brian Bolter, who has a wrap-up for us on today's action.
Mike, in many ways, truly heart-stopping. You're right. You know, for those people who are just now getting home, settling in for what is going to be a long night of ongoing developments, let's see if we can kind of put our arms around the most recent developments and put it into perspective for you just a little bit. It has been 9 hours now since what is surely going to be the worst terrorist attack on U.S. soil. It was a coordinated assault against key targets in the United States, specifically New York City and right here at home in Washington, D.C. Countless number of fatalities, even more injuries, and the tolls continue to rise as we speak. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center collapsed this morning after two hijacked planes crashed into them, and a third building in New York City imploded just a short time ago. That right there is called the number 7 World Trade Center building. It happened within the last hour. The 47-story office building had already been evacuated, but sustained incredible structural damage because of the World Trade Center attacks. New York area hospitals are reporting 2,100 people have been injured. Some more, 1,500, according to Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, are considered walking wounded. Just a few minutes ago, New York Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton spoke. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what she had to say.
I think that it's clear to everyone this was an attack on America. It may have been directed at New York, but it really is attacking everything we stand for in every part of our country. And I'm very proud of the way New Yorkers responded.
We are getting early word now about the attack on the Pentagon here in Washington. At least 100 people are killed or injured in the attack. Law enforcement officials are confirming that it was an American Airlines flight number 77 bound from Dulles out to Los Angeles. That was the plane that slammed into the Pentagon. And we're starting to get a glimpse into the horror of the passengers on board that plane that came crashing into the Pentagon. Friends confirm that Republican activist Barbara Olson was on board that flight, that American flight bound for Los Angeles, and actually called her husband twice from her cell phone during the hijacking before the fiery crash. Barbara Olson was a frequent guest here on Fox Morning News as a novelist and political commentator. In an interview with a family friend, they say that Miss Olson was originally booked on a flight leaving yesterday, but wanted to stay and have breakfast with her husband this morning to celebrate his birthday. Barbara Olson lived in Great Falls, Virginia, where her and her husband threw numerous parties, including the likes of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Barbara married Ted Olson in 1996. He is the Solicitor General and argued President Bush's case before the Supreme Court. Barbara Olson spent 3 years with the Washington law firm William Cutler and Pickering. She was also a former United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, prosecuting drug cases. The FAA has shut down all air traffic in the United States. It's the first time in American history this has happened. And planes like this one have been rerouted many times, diverted to Canada, which is where that plane is now. You can see in this video, law enforcement agents are preparing to board that plane. There's no word on where it originated from, its destination, or how many people are on board. The exception to the rule, of course, is President George Bush, who was in Florida when all of this unraveled. He then made a unscheduled stop outside of Shreveport, Louisiana, then went to one of the most secure facilities in the United States, an Air Force base outside of Omaha, where he met with his National Security Council. He is now en route, if not has not already arrived here in Washington, D.C., and we are told that the president is going to speak to the nation at 9 o'clock this evening, so another 2.5, 3 hours or so. President Bush is expected to once again address the nation about the devastation that has unfolded throughout our country here in this terrorist attack. You know, the top congressional leaders, of course, have a contingency plan when all of this happens. They were whisked away to a secure facility, which is about 75 miles west of Washington. They are due to return later this evening as well. Mike Tracy, that's the latest from here in the newsroom.
All right, thank you so much, Brian. We're going to go back now to the scene in Afghanistan. You are looking at pictures coming into our newsroom right now, thanks to our affiliate CNN. You can see explosions off in the distance with the glowing smoke. We are told that that may be a fuel tank or an ammunitions dump that's on fire. We're waiting for confirmation of that right now. Explosions could be heard across the city, the capital city of Kabul, we are told. Osama bin Laden, the person that the United States believes was responsible for masterminding the attacks in New York and at the Pentagon today, has lived in Afghanistan for 5 years. Those attacks going on right now at 2:45 a.m. there, local time in Afghanistan. You can see pictures right now of Osama bin Laden with many of his followers. It is believed that there are training camps for his soldiers there in Afghanistan. He has been on the FBI's 10 most wanted list for many years now. He is believed to have been responsible for the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center in New York. Not nearly as devastating as the bombing there today.
Devastating nonetheless, and as we've said, the problem with Afghanistan and having him there, which of course is a pleasant problem for them, is that he's fought there, he knows that area, they can hide out. I mean, obviously the man has been hiding out for 7 years plus. It's a very, very difficult situation for us, and even this is more of a show of our anger and our frustration at what's taken place. Whether it will have an effect on a group like this, we don't know.
And whether or not he's even there in Afghanistan is really unclear at this point. But we're going to come back now to the district. Again, a states of emergency declared, and they continue tonight in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Fox 5's Will Thomas is downtown in Northwest with the very latest here. Will.
Tracy and Mike, certainly a day full of catastrophic events, all of which could individually be a headline on any TV newscast in any newspaper. Let me show you how the Washington Post is handling it. This is a look at their special late edition today, Terror Hits Pentagon, World Trade Center. This copy just picked up from Charlotte of Centerville. You can see the plane just before it hit one of the towers. Let me show you another incredible photograph from the Associated Press in this late edition as people are escaping downtown Manhattan shortly after one of the World Trade Center buildings collapsed. Pretty amazing, amazing pictures. Earlier this afternoon, I spoke with some Metro employees, some train drivers from the Farragut North Station. They said they have been asked to look for suspicious packages or individuals, and they tell us security is heightened not only on the lines themselves, but in the individual stations. And here at Kay in Connecticut, where we are, the businesses have literally shut down. You can see here, they are closed. You can see the signs, closed, closed. This big CVS here just shut its doors for the day. Still a secure perimeter around the White House and Executive Office building. Coming up a little later, we're going to show you once again our interview, exclusive Fox 5 interview with Los Angeles Mayor James Hahn as he entered a local blood bank to help out in some way. For now, I'm Will Thomas, live in Northwest. Back to you guys.
All right, thanks so much, Will.
We understand that the president, who is headed back, if he's not already back here in Washington, D.C., will be addressing the nation tonight at 9 o'clock to talk about what has taken place on this horrible, horrible day in America's history. Truly an awful day in the history of the world to have something like this take place. But the president will speak to the issues that have taken place and certainly will probably address what we're seeing happen there on the right-hand side of the screen.
Let's go back to Bob Barnard now at the Pentagon. Bob.
Well, again, just to tell you that the firefighting efforts are intensifying on the right side of the building here, the roof, the right side of the, which is south from our vantage point, the south side of the building here, where they are trying to knock down this fire. And the difficulty may be that they'd probably sure like to have some firefighting assistance from inside, and you can see the very thick smoke there. But it's almost like they are paralyzed on the roof here, wondering how to get water, as you see very clearly here. Primarily Arlington County firefighters trying to figure out how to put this fire out, and they can't do that at this point. They are trying. We haven't seen water being applied in the last little bit, and we have not, from our vantage point with our camera lens, of course, we can get in pretty close to the crater here. We cannot see any signs of the airplane that the American Airlines jet that caused this crash. You would think perhaps you'd be able to see some part of the airplane, some indication that it was indeed an aircraft, not some other bomb that did this, but we can't. And you can see a file cabinet there in the exposed office here. And again, I think Brian Bolter mentioned a number just a short time ago, perhaps 100 casualties in here. We won't know, and the authorities here won't know for some time. And if you can see just above the word live here, a couple of these little things standing up there, they've brought in some big generators. The Army obviously has a lot of generating power. They have brought in some generators in the last hour, and they're setting up lights because it'll be dark here. The sun's behind us, about to go down in a little bit. So they will be pouring light on this to keep this work going on overnight. And as again, you look at the top of the building there, they're just still trying to get this fire under control, which is, now 9.5 hours old. So the work here continues. It's going to be a long process. Obviously, New York, devastating. And I'll tell you what also, the Navy spokesman earlier, Mike and Tracy, had asked people who worked here, U.S. Navy and Marine Corps personnel who worked in this part of the building, which is, and if you bear with me 1 second, I'll tell you the part of this building. It's wedges 1 and 2, they call it here, parts of wedges 1 and 2, area of corridor 4, and they call them the rings going inside leading into the atrium. The outer ring is the E ring, the D ring, the next one in, and part of the C ring have all been damaged by this terrorist act here. And I hate to venture into the personal, but I'm wondering what the family members of people who've got loved ones inside this right now must be thinking, because frankly, I'm from New York and have a lot of friends from my childhood who work in Wall Street, and a very close family friend. Again, I'm a little reluctant to do this, but only because it'll give you an idea of the number of people that have been touched by this here, obviously because of the Pentagon, but obviously clearly in New York. This family friend worked on one of the upper floors, I think 100 or 101st floor for a Wall Street firm, and he was in the building, the second building to be hit. And I talked to, frankly, my father on Long Island, and he told me that he had spoken to this friend's mother. She had heard from him after the other building had been hit, and he told her he was, and the rest of his office were going to evacuate. They were in, I believe it was the North Tower, the second one to be hit, and they have not heard from him since. So a lot of people who were in that one building and saw the, as you see, pictures from New York on the left there, who were in the one building, knew that the other tower had been hit, were trying to scramble to get out of there, and I'm sure that was chaos. And at least in my particular case, a very close family friend, a guy a year older than me who I grew up with, called home, frankly called his wife, who then called his mother, and said, the building next to us has been hit, we're getting out of here, and they have not heard from him again. So that's those kinds of stories, I am afraid, especially in New York, are going to be told time and again. And then that's, we're looking at the pictures, but inside a lot of people's hearts right now, a lot of suffering, because in New York, as you see on the left side of the screen, among the injured and the missing and the feared dead, and on the right side of the screen, the people at the Pentagon, perhaps as many as 100 or more feared dead. And there are families in our area who have perhaps lost loved ones here at the Pentagon, and they don't know for sure, but I bet they know in their hearts that that's the case, because they probably haven't heard from these people. And again, the Navy and the Marine Corps are asking anybody who worked, any civilians who worked, civilians in active duty, frankly, who worked in this part of the Pentagon, to call them, because they want to hear from them to find out who made it out and who didn't. And scores didn't here in Washington, many, many more in New York, and it's just an incredible day to think about it and to feel that when you look at these pictures. Incredible stuff going on in America today.
And I thank you for sharing that personal story of how you're relating the situation in New York and your family friend to what family members here in Washington must be feeling. And I want to give out that number that the Pentagon, the Navy gave us. It's 877-663-6772. Again, it's 877-663-6772. And again, this is the number to report your status to the government, to let them know that you weren't in the building, that you are okay, so that then they can finally start putting some names and numbers together and have an idea of how many people, civilian or military active duty, were inside that section of the Pentagon when it was struck today.
I don't know if you can hear me, Tracy, still.
Yes,
Yes, go ahead, Bob.
But that number, again, the officials here say they're still in the information gathering stage. That's why they have given us very little information about potential casualties. They want people, Marine Corps and Navy personnel, to call the number there on the bottom of the screen, because they want to take an accounting from the people who made it out to get an understanding of the people who did not make it out. Again, these pictures from Skyfox a little time ago just showing the utter devastation here. A chunk of the Pentagon, the outer ring of the Pentagon, decimated by a commercial aircraft that was intentionally steered into the building this morning, and now 9.5, approaching 10 hours later, still on fire. Urban search and rescue teams from Fairfax County and Montgomery County still unable to get in to take an accounting and to try to rescue people who may still be alive inside there, not knowing what's going on and what hit them.
All right. Thank you very much. Bob Barnard reporting live from the Pentagon.
We are stunned by this. We live and work in this area. This is right down the street. Many of us drive by the Pentagon daily, and we see this, and it is stunning. The folks in New York, we can't even imagine what they're going through. I mean, here are two huge buildings, 110 stories apiece, that have been leveled there, plus another building that was next door to it. Part of the World Trade Center complex came down as well. It's quite a mess back there, but of course we're focusing at this moment on what's happening right here in our own neck of the woods. Let's go to
Fox 5's Paul Wagner
That's
live
who I was
in
trying
the
to
streets
say.
of D.C. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Paul, what's going on?
Well, we've been down at this downtown area for many, many hours now. It has calmed down considerably, Mike and Tracy, but we are still hearing wailing sirens going up and down the side streets, seeing a lot of official vehicles, Secret Service, FBI, D.C. police coming and going. We have not been hearing on the police radio channels a lot of suspicious packages or vehicles or checking out underground parking garages as much as we did earlier today. There have been numerous that have been checked out, but D.C. Police Chief Charles Ramsey telling us earlier today that they have so far found no live devices anywhere. There was a scare over at Union Station at one point that there was a bomb dog that did hit on a package over there, and Union Station was closed down for a while along with the metro station over there. We can show you just up the street here, up 17th Street. You can see it's closed off. There are a lot of officials standing in the street. The yellow police tape along with the police cars blocking off access to get up towards the executive office buildings and the White House. A number of the flags that fly up and down Connecticut Avenue and K Street here have been lowered to half-mast. Some of them still up, but some of the people have gotten up onto the buildings and lowered these flags to half-mast. Now, I think we do have an interview queued up, ready to go with a person we did find earlier today. Nelson Jones and I, the photographer, have been spending hours down here talking with people. We found a man who witnessed that jet going into the side of the Pentagon. We do not have that interview, I'm sorry. Reuben Pemberton was his name. He described to us just an amazing scene of being on 395, the Shirley Highway, heading towards the 14th Street Bridge, and watching that jet go into the Pentagon. We showed a little bit of that to you a little bit before, but we don't have the tape at the moment. Let me also tell you that we did see the D.C. National Guard coming through here. There were about 10 to a dozen Humvees that came down K Street. They got a police escort. It said military police on the side of the MVs. It looked like they may have been heading to the Special Operations Division headquarters of the D.C. Police, which is down on L Street, to get their orders as to exactly where to go. D.C. Police operating under a state of emergency. D.C. Police Chief Charles Ramsey telling every officer on his force that they would be working and be working 12-hour shifts. At one point, he did have recruits from the training academy ringing the D.C. Police headquarters, protecting that area. They had evacuated that building, and also One Judiciary Square, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the FBI Washington Field Office, all down in that area, evacuated from non-essential personnel. And many of those areas ringed with either officers or agents with machine guns and shotguns. So at this point, very calm down here. If you saw Will Thomas's live shot a little while ago, he was showing you that a lot of the businesses are shut down, but much more calm now than it had been in recent hours. Mike and Tracy.
We are getting some interesting reports from CNN right now. We're looking at a picture of the Pentagon, but if we could just switch back to Kabul and Afghanistan. Now, we had seen these pictures. We know that there have been explosions in the capital of Afghanistan tonight, but we are getting word that the White House is saying that the U.S. that President Bush did not order attacks against Afghanistan. Now, as you can imagine, as has been the case since this morning, this is very much a developing story. We are passing along information to you as soon as we get it, so we are trying to get that cleared up right now. We know that President Bush will be addressing the nation at 9 o'clock tonight from the White House. Between now and then, though, hopefully we can get this cleared up so that we know if, in fact, the United States is launching any missiles or explosions in Afghanistan.
This is an interesting situation with the Afghanistan pictures you're seeing there, because these aren't explosions or bombs that have gone off. We actually saw air-to-ground missiles and what appeared to be jet aircraft flying through that area. It may not have been, but it certainly appeared to be. So this is a military operation of some sort. We just, at this point, the United States is saying that we didn't have a part of that. Let's start with a retired admiral who is joining us right now. I'm sorry, I cannot read my...
Eugene Carroll.
Thank you very much.
Retired Rear Admiral.
Thank you, sir, for being with us. Tell us a little bit about what you think about what you see happening in front of you right now.
It is incredible. I do not believe the United States has launched retaliatory attacks. We had no warning of this event, which means we had no knowledge of who perpetrated it. Therefore, how could we be retaliating against people we don't know are responsible?
That is a question that's being raised now, certainly because the White House has said that we didn't have any part of it, but that raises another question. Now we have two mysteries. Who was responsible for the attacks on us this morning, and who's responsible for the attacks that are taking place in Afghanistan?
Absolutely. It shows that this idea of terrorist activity can work both ways, but I have no idea who would be attacking Kabul with modern weapons at this point.
Could that be possibly one of our allies taking it on their own to get into this?
No, that's the last thing in the world it could be.
So what would be the first thing, if I could just ask?
Well, the first thing would be another Muslim nation that used this as an opportunity to strike back at Afghanistan for some reason important to them.
Any possible candidates in your mind?
Not that I can think of. You've caught me absolutely cold on this.
Well, we're all caught a cold by this
Yes.
one. There's no question about that, sir. We appreciate your talking with us today. So tell me, what is your take on the events of the day? Did we just get caught flat-footed all the way around on this? Did we just not have any idea what was going on?
We got caught by the fact that terrorists operate in the black, in the dark, and we don't have an intelligence system which can penetrate
Rear Admiral,
that.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you. We're getting a briefing now from the Pentagon.
Thank you.
I believe this is Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense. With the audio here, I'm not sure exactly what it is, and we'll try to get it sorted out.
Pentagon all day.
Here we go. Well, there we were.
And we're having difficulty?
This is all so hastily put together, as you can imagine, with what's taken place over these past 9+ hours. Something as simple as a microphone not working would be not unusual. We only wish we knew what he was saying. Perhaps we should break away and pick this up as we are able to get that sound. Again, over on the left-hand side of your screen, you're looking at what took place in Afghanistan.
In Kabul, around 2:30 in the morning, first appeared that the U.S. had retaliated, striking the capital of Afghanistan, the home for the past 5 years of Osama bin Laden, the man who is believed to be behind the devastating attacks, the largest terrorist attack on U.S. soil that took place this morning.
Here by Chairman
Let's
Carl
listen
Levin
in now.
And Senator John Warner. Senator Warner called earlier today and offered his support and was kind enough to come down and has been with us. We've very recently had a discussion with the President of the United States. Chairman Hugh Shelton has just landed from Europe. Secretary of the Army, Tom White, who has a responsibility for incidents like this as executive agent for the Department of Defense, is also joining me. It's an indication that the United States government is functioning in the face of this terrible act against our country. I should add that the briefing here is taking place in the Pentagon. The Pentagon's functioning. It'll be in business tomorrow. I know the interest in casualty figures, and all I can say is it's not possible to have solid casualty figures at this time, and the various components are doing roster checks, and we'll have information at some point in the future, and as quickly as it's possible to have it, it will certainly be made available to each of you. I'll be happy to take a few questions after asking First General Shelton if he would like to say anything, and then we will allow the others to make a remark or two.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Secretary just said, today we have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people, acts that have killed and maimed many innocent and decent citizens of our country. I extend my condolences to the entire Department of Defense families, military and civilian, and to the families of all those throughout our nation who lost loved ones. I think this is indeed a reminder of the tragedy and the tragic dangers that we face day in and day out, both here at home as well as abroad. I would tell you up front, I have no intentions of discussing today what comes next, but make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
Chairman. Chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin.
Our intense focus on recovery and helping the injured and the families of those who were killed is matched only by our determination to prevent more attacks and matched only by our unity to track down, root out, and relentlessly pursue terrorists, states that support them, and harbor them. They are the common enemy of the civilized world. Our institutions are strong, and our unity is palpable.
Senator John Warner.
Thank you. As a past chairman preceding Carl Levin, I can assure you that the Congress stands behind our president, and the president speaks with one voice for this entire nation. This is indeed the most tragic hour in America's history, and yet I think it can be its finest hour, as our president and those with him, most notably our Secretary of Defense, our chairman, and the men and women of the armed forces all over this world stand ready not only to defend this nation and our allies against further attack, but to take such actions as are directed in the future in retaliation for this terrorist act, a series of terrorist acts unprecedented in world history. We call upon the entire world to step up and help, because terrorism is a common enemy to all, and we're in this together. The United States has borne the brunt, but who can be next? Step forward and let us hold accountable and punish those that have perpetrated this attack. Again, I commend the Secretary, the Chairman, and how proud we are. We spoke with our President here moments ago. He's got a firm grip on this situation, and the Secretary and the General have a firm grip on our armed forces and in communication of the world over.
Thank you very much. We'll take a few questions and then we'll adjourn. Charlie.
Mr. Secretary, did you have any inkling at all in any way that something of this nature and something of this scope might be planned?
Charlie, we don't discuss intelligence matters.
I see. And how would you respond if you find out who did this?
Obviously, the President of the United States has spoken on that subject, and those are issues that he will address in good time.
Mr. Secretary, we are getting reports from CNN and others that there are bombs exploding in Kabul, Afghanistan. Are we at the moment striking back, and if so, is the target Osama bin Laden and his organization?
I've seen those reports. They, in no way is the United States government connected to those explosions.
What about Osama bin Laden? Do you suspect him as the prime suspect in this?
It's not the time for discussions like that.
Mr. Secretary, you said you could not be specific about casualties. Can you give us some characterization of whether it's dozens or hundreds in the building?
Well, we know there were large number, many dozens in the aircraft that flew at full power, steering directly into between, I think, the first and second floor of the opposite the helipad. You've seen it. There cannot be any survivors. It just would be beyond comprehension. There are a number of people that they've not identified by name, but identified as being dead, and there are a number of casualties. But the FBI has secured the site, and the information takes time to come. People have been lifted out and taken away in ambulances, and the numbers will be calculated, and it will not be a few.
Mr. Secretary,
could you tell us what you saw?
Mr. Secretary, do you consider what happened today, both in New York and here, an act of war?
There is no question but that the attack against the United States of America today was a vicious, well-coordinated, a massive attack against the United States of America. What words the lawyers will use to characterize it is for them.
Does that mean that the U.S. is at war then?
Mr. Secretary, you said that the Pentagon would be open for business tomorrow. What kind of assurances can you give the people who work here at the building that the building will be safe?
A terrorist can attack at any time, at any place, using any technique. It is physically impossible to defend at every time, in every place, against every technique. It is not possible to give guarantees. The people who work in this building do so voluntarily. They're brave people, and they do their jobs well.
Mr. Secretary, can you give a sense of what happened? What did you see when you left your office, ran down to the site, and apparently helped people on stretchers and then returned to the command center?
I felt the shock of the airplane hitting the building, went through the building and then out into the area, and they were bringing bodies out that had been injured, most of which were alive and moving, but seriously injured. And a lot of volunteers were doing a terrific job helping to bring them out of the buildings and get them into stretchers and into ambulances and into airlifts.
Secretary, could you tell us
We've
how
been
many
watching a
of the
Pentagon
dead
briefing
were
here that's been taking place, taking questions now about what has taken place today. Brian Bolter joins me now. Tracy's getting some information ready for our broadcast at 10 o'clock tonight. Very quickly, in that situation, they were asked if the United States had anything to do with the attack that took place in Afghanistan, and he said we were absolutely not connected, which raises the question, so who was?
Well, I believe initial reports in the Associated Press are it's an internal conflict having to do with a general there and some issues in the last couple of weeks or so. So it looks like that's an internal conflict in some of those explosions.
The Taliban as opposed to the government that's supposed to be in charge. We have some video now that is provided to us by CNN, an individual private citizen who happened to be in Manhattan when the second airplane crashed into the second tower today. Take a look at this video. We're seeing it for the first time, too. All eyes were in the sky at the very beginning, because we were looking at that first fire.
It's truly a heart-stopping video when you sit back and realize that this is real. This isn't something out of a movie. This is ground-level view of the World Trade Center crash into the ground.
This guy's,
take a listen.
He's narrating this. He's saying, I hope I live, I hope I live. Look at this.
It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help, because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm just getting a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. This is the car I hid behind. It saved my life. Oh, wait, maybe it was this one. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Where are you?
Oxygen. Don't have oxygen.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him.
10-4.
Thanks.
Truly amazing.
Unbelievable. We don't know the identity of the person who shot that, but apparently it was a doctor asking if people needed a doctor. And it looked like the nuclear winter video that we see in movies that after the big bomb has gone off.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
And you hope with that kind of access that he was able to help some people. That is the president landing right now live, I believe on the south lawn of the White House in one of the many various vehicles that he has to transport himself safely and securely. We are anticipating an announcement, some remarks from the president this evening at 9 o'clock. We heard from him briefly earlier today from a facility outside of Shreveport, Louisiana. He went there from Florida, spoke briefly, talked about this being the act of a faceless coward. It is an attack on our freedom, and that our freedom will be defended. Very strong words, obviously, to match the terrible events that have taken place today.
His first words as he described the incident that had taken place, the very first airplane that hit the first tower. He spoke to reporters on the spot, and in the time that it took for him to get the information and for him to respond to reporters there, a second aircraft came and crashed into the second tower. This has been an unbelievable day for George W. Bush.
We know that Vice President Dick Cheney has been at the White House in a secure part of the White House for the duration of this day, as well as Condoleezza Rice. She has also been at the White House as well, while President Bush has been traveling about the United States, making sure that he is briefed in secure settings, as is the Air Force Base outside of Omaha, which is where he met with his National Security Council. And obviously he is well prepared to address the nation here in a few hours.
We were hearing earlier that the folks who were in charge of his security wanted very much to take him directly to Colorado Springs and to put him inside Cheyenne Mountain, put him inside the NORAD headquarters there, which is, of course, inside a mountain, solid rock, to make sure that he was okay. There are those who would argue that the President of the United States needs to be visible in this country and to be able to speak out against these unspeakable acts that have taken place on our soil today.
Obviously, the political pressures of being here in Washington versus the security pressures of making sure that he's safe and sound, both tugging at the president, and he did, I'm sure, what he thought was best.
We'll find out in just a little bit on what's going on. One of the big questions that we have tonight, of course, is that after all of the events of this day, and then assigning the blame, as it were, to Osama bin Laden, and not the blame, as it were, they're essentially saying they think he's the one that was responsible for it. We see these attacks that take place in Afghanistan, and now it appears that it may be part of an internal conflict.
This is incredible, Mike. Look at that.
This is another view of that same thing, and I don't know where you were at the time, Brian, but I was at home I'd heard about the first crash, was madly trying to get myself ready to get to the station, and watched this for just a half a second, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yeah.
I thought, first of all, why is an aircraft flying so close to this thing where a tragedy has taken place? And this is what we saw.
This is a truly unique perspective. Watch as it just tears through the building.
Unbelievable.
And disintegrates on impact, obviously.
One of the things that was pointed out by one of our terrorism experts today as we were talking, he was saying that this had